Hi there, my name is Angela Kegley and this is my final project. So I want to start by going over what we have learned this semester. Because over this course of the semester, we have worked with many different processes and viewed different ways that we gather information and make decisions that all go into providing the best education for our students who need special needs or who have special needs. Today, I will be going over the different models and processes that go with the special education process and how we can use these scores to entice families to get involved with their students' education. So, what is the least restrictive classroom? So, of course, we want all of our students to be in the general education classroom most of the time because that's where all of the teaching is taking place and all of the content is being presented to all the students. And of course, we want every student to be there to receive and take in this information. However, some students do need to be removed because they're not able to take in what they need from the classroom, or they may not be able to gain all of the information, or they could be disrupting another student's education themselves. So, what we need to do in this situation is to remove the student and put them into another classroom or a special school that will provide extra resources and extra tools for them. We would rather not do this. We do want to try and keep the student inside the classroom, but for the benefit of the student themselves and the other students, if the general education teacher and the special education teacher deem it necessary, then the student does need to be removed and put into a different class. So what are the regulations and requirements of providing the least restrictive environment? So no matter where the student is, we do need to ensure that they are continuing the same curriculum and the same education that all the other students are receiving. Whether they are having to be removed because of a severe situation behaviorally, or so they can get extra help so that they are able to take in the knowledge, or whether it's a resource room where they need to take a break. We want to ensure that they're getting the same content and following the same curriculum as every other student. Um, again, this is not our first step whenever we go into providing different changes for a student. We, of course, take other steps, and any decisions about the student and their placement will need to be made by the IEP team, including their parents. So the next thing we will talk about is the assessment process. So here we can see this is the cycle of the assessment. We start with the information referral, and then we move on to the determination of eligibility, then the program planning, and then the program implementation and evaluation. So the first part of the cycle is the identification and referral. The first part of this is screening and teacher identification of students with school problems. So we have teachers and people of the community who are trained and know what signals to look out for students who do have disabilities. At this point in the process, it's simply just people talking and saying, hey, I believe that this student may need extra assistance. Then we move on to the pre-referral strategies. At this point, the general education teacher should be making accommodations and adaptations to their room to provide that extra assistance and see if maybe it's just they need to sit a little closer because maybe they have a little trouble with vision, but not to the extent to where they would need special education services. Some of these examples of strategies that we can use are conferences with the students and parents, modifications of the classroom behavior management, and much more. The referral and notification of parents is the next step. After we try the interventions, if those are still not working, then we need to begin the referral process, start getting the paperwork all in line to see about getting the student on an IEP and notifying the parents of the disabilities or the issues that we are seeing and how we are seeing that the student might need extra help. After the referral, the next step in the process is to determine if the student is eligible to receive the service. So the next step being determining if the student is eligible to be placed on special education services. The first step for this is the designing of the individual assessment plan. In this step, we will put a team together who will create and plan an assessment for assessing the student based on what their needs are and based on what we are seeing presently with them. So when we are doing this, we need to be considering the student and also the learning environment and the tasks that they are asked to complete. We need to determine whether it's just that they struggle at taking tests or whether it's they struggle with vision or if they struggle orally. Like, we need to take all of those things into consideration. After that, we need to ensure that we have parental permission for assessments. In all areas of special education, parental permission is one of the top things to remember. We do not want to do anything without permission from the parents. Even if we have notified them that we will be doing the testing or that we will be referring them, we still need to make sure that we have their permission. After we get the permission, we will administer the test and score and use our interpretations of what the assessment says. So this is when we do the test and we look at their scores and see how they're doing. There are many laws and regulations, so depending on what state you're in, what school you're in, what your district and what your federal and what your state laws are, you will need to check on those and see what those say for you. Then we will report the results. So we want to report the results to the person who is going to evaluate the student and who's going to evaluate the scores and those who are going to need to make the decision about the eligibility. But we also need to make sure that these results are reported to the parents because, again, we need to make sure the parents are staying informed with all steps through this. The final thing is the decision about eligibility. The team will all come together and make the decision using the test scores from the assessments that we did with the students, and we will determine whether, based off of the federal, state, and district laws, if we feel that they need to be placed on an IEP and receive special education services. After we have determined that a student is eligible to receive special education services, we will go on to planning their program. The very first part of this is to design their individualized education program. This is the IEP, which is the big document that pretty much says all of their information, their adaptations, their test scores, what the disabilities they need special education services for, all the information behaviorally, socially, educationally, statistically, all that information will be in here. So throughout this process, we need to make sure that we get the whole team together. We get the whole IEP team together. So for example, in an IEP meeting, you need to have the special education teacher, the general education teacher, preferably a principal or at least an administrator from the school counselor, the parents, and sometimes even the student. It depends on the disability and how aware and the age of the student. That is what depends on if the student should be present. But again, that's another case-by-case basis. We as a team need to plan a meeting where we can come together and discuss and go over the whole IEP. Overall, the special education teacher does most of the writing. They put all the information in there, but as a team, we decide collectively whether we feel there needs to be any modifications, whether we feel like it is completely accurate, and whether we feel that this will help our student success further in their education, because that is, in the end, the goal is we would prefer for them to be able to continue their education and succeed beyond what they have already. We do need to make sure that this meeting is happening within 30 days of them being determined to be eligible, because legally that is the limit, the timeline. With the IEP, we will also need to make sure that we are identifying specific goals that we wish for our student to meet and how they will measure those goals throughout the year. Alrighty, so after we have had the IEP meeting and we've had the parents' approval to move forward, we will start implementing the IEP. As the year goes on, we should be providing the student with the services, whether it be different adaptations in the class, whether it be a weekly meeting in the resource room, whether it be a daily meeting in the resource room for 10 minutes, whether it be daily breaks, whether it be classes that are to be provided. We need to make sure that this student is receiving all the adaptations and all of the best skills that they are supposed to from our IEP. In using that, we will also continue to monitor their progress. we will monitor whether they are doing any better, whether these things are helping them go past their goal that they wanted to, or whether they are on track with their class, or whether they are falling behind even more, because we, of course, do not want them to fall back. And if that is happening, then we need to make sure that we are able to get on top of that and get a new plan going for them as soon as possible. It is also important that we do an annual review of the IEP. We want to do that at least once a year, and we want to make sure that we're using both formal and informal procedures to gather data to come together for this review. And then every 3 years, we need to make sure that we are reevaluating the student to make sure that they are still eligible. That means going over the assessment process again and going over the whole thing, making sure that their IEP is up to date, almost cycling through. So then you might ask, why is it considered a cycle? Like I said, once you hit the program implementation evaluation, you start reviewing them annually, and you start reviewing them every 3 years to determine if they're still eligible, which starts you back at the first process. So even though your student may be making progress, we still need to make sure that they are needing these tools and that they are receiving all the proper tools that do help them. So the next thing we need to talk about is family participation. There are many ways that we want the families to be involved, but specifically in special education, we want to ensure that parents know to be involved and know to be there for their student. So I've listed 6 different ways for us to encourage family participation. The first step that we can do is to get parents involved by inviting them to share their knowledge about their child and reach out to us whenever they have anything they want to share. Because in the end, we do need parent communication, and we want to know more about the child. We want to know how the child works best and what they do and don't need, and nobody knows their child best like their parents. Another thing that we want to do is to create achievable yet challenging goals that the student is working at school and at home. This will get this parents engaged because it will also keep the students engaged. While it might be something that we're actively working on at school, having the parents able to assist in some way at home will keep that continuity for their school and home life, but also get them both engaged all day through the whole school and home life. Another thing we want to do is be professional when meeting with parents. When we meet with parents, we want to ensure that we are putting our best selves forward, but we also want to make sure that we're not being overly professional and that we are using parent-friendly language, because we don't want them to come in this and feel like they're being disrespected or that they don't even understand what we're talking about. Alrighty, the fourth one is respecting parents. While respect is always a given with anybody, we want to ensure that we are respecting parents and that they understand that we are here to respect their cultural norms and values. We don't want to make them feel undervalued or underappreciated in any way. We want to ensure that they won't be ignored and that their voice will not be silenced in our classroom or our services. As a team, we should all be creating a safe and supportive environment so that they feel comfortable to ask the questions and to feel comfortable knowing that their child is in a safe and supportive environment. Because if the parent can't trust that we are taking care of their child on a daily basis, how are they supposed to trust that we are having the best interest for their student in mind at all times? The last tip that I have is to keep parents informed, especially if parents are not knowledgeable about the process. Keeping them informed on what is going on and what the next step in their process is will cause the parents to stay more involved, because they will feel more involved. They won't feel like they are being brought into a completely new and abstract subject. So next I'm going to talk about tests and assessments. I know we talked about it a little bit earlier, but the ones that I'm going to talk about specifically are norm reference tests. These are used to determine where a child falls in a group of people who have taken the same assessment or who are placed in the same category. There are many different types of norm reference tests to find the derivative scores of a student, but the 3 I'm going to talk about is percentile tests, standard scores, and stenines. So percentile ranks is when the student score indicates the percentage of individuals within the norm group who have achieved the same score. So for example, if they got a 40 on their test, but that lists them as a 65 percentile, that means 65% of the students received a 40 as their grade. Standard scores are the raw scores, but they're put on a new scale to use the mean and standard deviation. They're used to compare different age or grade groups within the whole sample. The Stanine is a distribution that is divided into 9 segments, which is each 0.5 of standard deviation in width. It also lists the percentage of cases that are expected to fall within this Stanine. So on this next slide, I will show you a graph that goes over, as we can see, the percentile rank here, and then the Stanine percentage, and then the sample standard score. Alrighty, so thank you guys so much for watching. We have covered so much information this semester, and even though we can't go over everything we learned in a short presentation, these are the 4 biggest ideas that we had covered this semester. We discussed how to create the least restrictive environment for students who need special education services, and then we covered the assessment process and the cycle for getting a student assessed for special education. And then we went over 5 strategies that we can use to encourage families to participate in not only the special education process, but education overall. And then the 3 main ways that are used to assess using norm reference tests. Again, thank you guys so much. My name is Angela Kegley.